Peace and power back live with Readyo Radio, episode 38, paying homage to the late great Malcolm X, and we've been showing a couple of videos so far, and that last video was really powerful. That's probably my favorite scene from the movie, and that's a movie by Spike Lee that we talked about earlier. And for those who are listening in or that weren't able to see the video, basically. Someone had been injured someone had been injured and was in the hospital, and basically the whole crowd had come to see to demand justice and make sure that he was all right under the leadership of Malcolm X. And like a powerful leader, he addressed the police. Everybody came there with the order, and he was able to I want to say control, but direct and channel the people, in an orderly fashion, dissipate the crowd without incident. There was no issues, and I don't know if we showed it. He said it at the end. We were getting prepared to come back on, but did he say at the end of that, he said no man should have that much power.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a pretty powerful statement. I just wanted to kind of jump back into the conversation there.
Yeah, and that's really why we put that one in that space, so that we can segue into. The way I look at it is, the media on some level mistakenly underestimated the power of us collectively, and thinking that since they control media, they could have us come on and express what we express, and nothing would happen. But we have seen in history that what they've learned from that time is never to give our community a leader that's going to be for us. So the Al Sharptons, the Jesse Jacksons, whatever you want to call them, most of these characters, I call them, are hand selected, and so they kind of play the agenda. I mean, Al Sharpton has his own show on CNN now or something. It's like, they would never give Malcolm X a show. You know what I mean? Like, can you imagine that? Malcolm X with a show on NBC today or something. Like, the point I'm trying to again say is that we have to learn from the past, and we expect for at some point in the near future for the next leader to be on TV fighting for us. We're sadly mistaken, because they've done that already, and they saw what happened at the very end of the clip. The guy says one man should not have that much power, because they worried about that. They worried about taking him out because they didn't know how collectively we would react. Like, nowadays, they're kind of, in my opinion, they're planning for some revolution. They're trying to jumpstart it. But back then, they were still working to capture the power and control the masses. Still, they were not sure that everything was under their control as they are now today, and so they had to be very careful. At the time, also, one of the things, if you've seen our advertisements on Facebook, we deliberately put a few images of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X as Professor X and Magneto, because the X-Men comic strip came out around civil rights time, and so even Stan Lee to this day admits that he modeled those two leaders after Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And Malcolm X was all about what Magneto was about. Let's go and destroy the people before they destroy us, by any means necessary. Let's just do what we got to do. And even at the end of there's a scene, I think it was near the end of the first recent X-Men movie that came out. Professor X, Xavier, and Magneto were playing chess, and then Magneto says, "I'm going to win by any means necessary." And they were trying to, even in the movie, trying to give you some of the energy from Malcolm X to put it into the X-Men character Magneto. So, but yeah, the reason the clip was there so that we can understand that it is possible. Even today, we still can have people to do those things. It's just it can't be looked upon as the media is not going to give you that leader.
Now that since you said that, we had a couple on our Facebook post. We put a couple of the memes and quotes from Malcolm X, and I wanted to read one. It says, "The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make innocent guilty and to make guilty innocent, and that's power, because they control the minds of the masses." And that's just one quote. And like Info Keith said, that was one of the main points that on top of owning our own, one of the main points that he always strive, that if you put your faith in media, and it could be white owned, it could be Hispanic owned, it could be whatever owned. If it's not representing your interests, it doesn't really matter the color. It just happens to be in our, in this frequency, in this dimension. It happens to be white people that own most of the media. But the point is, if you don't have a say in the message and crafting the message, then it makes that the most powerful tool. And that's why we are aware of that, because we did this show, and we're able to disseminate information that's contrary to the mainstream media. And I want to share another a quote that he had, and he says, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. And so just these real powerful statements that are very much true. If you're denying this statement, then you clearly don't know how Fox or the mass media works.
Yeah, and just veg back again off of what you said. That's why Malcolm X is one of my personal favorites, is because he was so far ahead of his time. You can bring back just about every speech that he ever delivered, and bring it back today, and it's still relevant. About police brutality, about owning our own stuff. Even before integration, that was what he said. He said, why are we the only people or group of people that are expected to march peacefully while being oppressed and while being killed and shot and dog sicked and water hose sprayed on us? It's why are we the only people that are expected to have a nonviolent revolution? And another thing he said was what are we even fighting for? To sit next to the white man on the toilet while we use the bathroom? Integration did not help us at all. What was the point? Before we had our own schools, we had our own stores, our own businesses, all of that. And after integration, the only thing we integrated was our dollars into everybody else's pockets. That's it. What else did we gain from that? I don't know if they thought that we will all equally have wealth or whatever, but that hasn't been the case at all. And
it's really one of the biggest experiments, in the 20th century.
Yeah, I feel integration in and of itself isn't bad. Anything in and of itself is a negative. It's what happens with it. It's the context it's used in. The Koreans, the Indians come over, they integrate, but they have a foundation in their culture. They have their language, they have their ways. They're not looking for approval, whereas the people who, as we have, our ancestors had their culture. We've said this numerous times on the show, had their identity stripped, and with that, once you integrate with the people, if you don't have no foundation, then you're going to just mimic what you see. And so, I believe as a people, before we look to integrate anywhere, we have to get back to our roots, which is again why we're doing this show here, paying homage. And our religion is a big part of Malcolm X's life, which I feel is another amazing aspect to this brother who was following the NOI and Elijah Muhammad and took his pilgrimage to Mecca. And in that whole process, around that same time frame, he started realizing that some of the things that he was being taught wasn't true and wasn't working for his interests. And so at that point, it was almost like I would imagine a modern day Christian realizing that this whole is a farce. Just Jesus guy isn't some white guy, and there's no sky daddy coming to save us. There's nothing of the sorts going to happen. And if you've lived 20, 30, maybe even 40 years with that, to have that as your foundation to be taken from under you, it's a very uncomfortable time, a very uncomfortable experience. But this brother did that, and not only did that, he came out better and stronger with a greater message. And I personally believe that's why they ultimately took him out, because once he saw through the vision they wanted, and this is probably partially going to help us peek into the second half of the show, which is going to be on racial tensions, and also the video we showed him discussing racial solutions, is that we have to realize it's all a game to get you to be focused on something negative and fighting something, because this is the problem. This is a problem they have engineered, which is we talked about the Hegelian dialectic, where they create this issue for you to focus on and fight because they have a solution for you that's going to benefit them. And so when he went over there and saw people, actually, I'll read an excerpt. I'm going to read an excerpt from another excerpt from his book, and it's this one's right after he came back from Mecca.
Well, while you
Sure.
pulling that up, another thing I wanted to say was about the media, and pretty much the people only respond to what the media tells them to respond to. So whatever you continuously see, it's just like Pavlov's dog. It's whatever you see, that's what stimulates you. So that's why they keep showing the Mike Browns and the Ferguson situations and that kind of stuff in the media, because they want you to react a certain way. Right after the Freddie Gray situation, a 19-year-old got shot 10 times by the police here in Detroit, but it wasn't really shown in the media. Because and if they would have kept showing it in the media, it would have been the same situation here.
Al Sharpton would have came.
Right.
Everybody would have came.
Same exact thing. But it's like, people shout that Black Lives Matter, but then they leave and go to McDonald's. So it's like, do Black lives really matter, or are you just responding to what the media told you to respond to?
And just a quick gem to drop. The Black Lives Matter hashtag, from my research understanding, was started by George Soros, who's a multi-billionaire white guy, and he did it because he knew it would create this aspect. Other people started saying, well, ant lives matter, and cops' lives matter, and dog lives matter. It's like it was well thought out prior to doing it, and we see that's exactly what happened.
It's propaganda, and that's what they do. If you look at, like, just do it, or support our troops, or I'm loving it. Like, it's the same thing. Black Lives Matter. Like, they give you something vague, but yet something that you can't disagree with. So it's like, support our troops. It's vague. What does that mean? But who's going to go against that? Black Lives Matter. What does that really mean?
At some point, don't you need to? Okay, because we can identify. We talked about the propaganda. We had a couple shows on that. So we talked about propaganda and the tools used. But at some point, we need our own propaganda that taps into those same strategies, because they're strategies that work. So at what point do we are we saying that we should reject? I don't know that it came from George Soros or where it actually originated, but do we say we reject the title, or I guess my bigger question is, at what point do we start utilizing propaganda and as a strategy the way that it's being used against us?
I believe with the show we have here and us, continuously pumping our product, having our T-shirts, having more people wanting to support us and looking for ways to support us by us reaching out as we have. But it looks like we're going to take a break. So before we do that, I want to get this the excerpt from autobiography. This is this is during his pilgrimage to Mecca. It reads, "It was the largest Hajj in history, I was later told. Kasim Gulek, the Turkish Parliament of the Turkish Parliament, beaming with pride, informed me that from Turkey alone, over 600 buses, over 50,000 Muslims had made the pilgrimage. I told him that I dreamed to see the day when shiploads and plane loads of American Muslims would come to Mecca for the Hajj. There was a color pattern in the crowds. Once I happened to notice this, I closely observed it. Thereafter, being from America made me intensely sensitive to matters of color. I saw that people who looked alike drew together and most of the time stayed together. This was entirely voluntarily. There being no other reason for it. But Africans were with Africans, Pakistanis were with Pakistanis, and so on. I tucked it into my mind that when I returned home, I would tell Americans this observation, that where true brotherhood existed among all colors, where no one felt segregated, there was no superiority complex and no inferiority complex. Then voluntarily, naturally, people of the same kind felt drawn together by which they had in common. And I just wanted to share that one to highlight something that I feel has been played against us using, again, propaganda, in that it's natural for people who function, talk, and do certain things alike and smell alike, whatever you want to look at it, to segregate themselves into like-mindedness. And I believe it is that thing we do naturally, which has been overstimulated to the fact now where it's how we see the world through those glasses. But I just feel like it's important that we understand that here's a man who went away from an area that has as much racial tension as us, being amongst people who are all practicing the same thing. And even there, just like New York City, you still see every people has decided to come together, which is natural.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. It's like we got to take a quick break, and we'll come back. And one of the points that you really made is this term self-interest, and we'll get into that term self-interest when we come back from break. So enjoy another one of the videos that we have for you on Malcolm X on this 90th celebration of his life. We'll be back after these messages. This is Readyo Radio. Peace.
Who has created the slum and the ghetto that you're living in? Nothing better, Jack.
And since the American white man has used his control over the press and over the textbooks and over all forms of media to make it appear that he has done us a favor by bringing us here and enslaving us, then the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has to rewrite history or retell history. And since the white man can't dispute this truth, he tries to defend himself by saying that Mr. Muhammad is teaching hate. It's not hate to say that we were kidnapped and brought here. It's true. It's not hate to say that we were Jim Crow, discriminated and segregated. It's true. It's not hate to say that the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in this country, came up with a hypocritical